going back now to golf and the Ryder Cup, and there is a direct parallel, unique parallel with Formula One in what we saw in the Ryder Cup at the weekend, where the Europeans trounced the Americans over the first 2 days, which were mixed matches. For those who don't know anything about golf, normally it's just an individual playing the course, basically, and then, yeah, you're aware of what the other players are doing, but ultimately it's you and the course, which makes the sport unique in that respect. But then what they do at the first 2 days of the Ryder Cup is that you are paired with another player from your team, and you play either alternate balls. He hits the ball, then you hit that ball, vice versa, or you both hit a ball and you take the best score, whoever gets it. In other words, you're paired up with somebody. And the really interesting thing there for me was that Scottie Scheffler, who's the #1 golfer in the world, lost all 4 of his paired matches. And Tiger Woods, another former #1, potentially one of the greatest golfers of all time, similarly appalling record in the Ryder Cup. Whenever he had to, there's Scheffler, there's Woods, whenever he had to pair with another player, his record was incredibly bad. And I say there's a parallel here because for me, and nobody in the golfing world is saying this, maybe because they don't follow Formula One at all, but for me, this is the Michael Schumacher thing. This is the thing of that he initiated really at the level that he did, of if you want me at Ferrari and if you want me to be world champion, I don't want somebody in the other car who's going to detract from what I do. I want somebody who's comfortable, who's not going to be a problem, who's going to do all the donkey work for me, who can win Grand Prix if the car is good enough and I have a problem with my car, fine. But I don't want anybody taking points from me. I don't want anybody coming into my peripheral vision when I'm in the garage. And it worked well for him, as we know, all those world championships. And that's why Max Verstappen, one of the reasons Max Verstappen is so good is because he's always had a teammate that he can kind of dominate without too much problem. Now, if you had, for example, Mika Hakkinen in the other Ferrari when Michael was racing, I don't think Michael would have been as good as he was. And equally, I think if you had George Russell or Charles Leclerc in the other Red Bull, I don't think Max would be as good as he is. Of course, he'd be as quick as he is, but would he be as good as keeping everything simple and organized around that world that he's created, that we saw effectively at the Nürburgring? I don't think he would. And I think that's the problem. When you are a #1 golfer and you've got to, and you hit a ball, and you hit a good drive, and then your teammate, let's call him a teammate, then takes your drive and puts it into the light rough just in front of the green when you know you would have been on the green, no problem at all, 12 feet from the pin, and then you got to play that guy's bad shot. They don't think, this is a pain, or why didn't he hit a better shot? Because they're totally into the whole rah-rah USA thing. They're totally into that. It doesn't even, but subconsciously, it's definitely there that they are suddenly not playing for themselves. They're playing around an environment. And as much as they may say, and as much as others may say they are brilliant team players, they're always there, they're happy to do this, happy to do that, ultimately, a Scottie Scheffler or a Tiger Woods does not need another golfer impinging on his peripheral vision. And it affects the way they play. And you may say, okay, well, what about Rory McIlroy on the European side, who's the world's #2? And as good as Scheffler, and had a brilliant record in the pairings, and has had a brilliant record in the pairings for so long, as did Seve Ballesteros years ago, and as does Tommy Fleetwood now, or even many of the European players. Well, the difference is, of course, that the way the Americans progress in the golfing world is very clinical and very linear and very focused on their own performance, whereas in Europe, generally, the backgrounds are a bit tougher and they have to make allowances and there's a bit more compromise, and it's just a wider range of experience you get playing in Europe. In America, it's just like, if you don't do it this way, the college system, and if you haven't won this and you haven't won that, you will not then progress to the next stage. And because of that, that's very like the Michael Schumacher way of how he progressed in motor racing. Straight in, Mercedes driver, straight in, Benetton, Flavio Briatore, Ferrari, bang, and then Mercedes at the end. It was just a bit like Max today, you could say. And I think Max would have the same problem. As I say, Max would suffer if he had somebody like Charles Leclerc in the other car, in the way Scottie Scheffler suffers if he has somebody like, Justin Thomas next to him or whoever it was. And so that's it. That's the parallel. And I don't think that applies to any other sport, because they're either team sports in a big way, like football, or they're one-on-one opponent sports like tennis, And so it's only this parallel. And I think it's fascinating to have seen that. In other words, it was quite easy to predict, as one did, that Scheffler was going to have a really, really bad 2 days before he went into the singles. Of course, in the singles, it's a different thing. He's playing for himself again. Of course, he won. No surprise. But when he's got to play team golf, big problem. And he's played other team golf matches and done well. But of course, the Ryder Cup, completely different environment. And that is where it comes into your peripheral vision. He didn't let it come in. His side of the garage was not affected by the other side when he was playing those other competitions, because they weren't anything like as big as the Ryder Cup.